Many people consider Jeff Bezos to be the wealthiest person on the planet. There have, however, been many billionaires and even trillionaires before him. Nonetheless, estimating the wealth of someone born in the 1400s or someone who possessed a kingdom can be difficult. However, a rather clear list can be produced by combining the opinions of several different specialists. Today, we're going to take a look at the top 10 richest people of all time and see how they own their wealth and what exactly they used it for. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe to see more videos like this. Let's get started. Number 10. William the Conqueror, $230 billion. When your name includes the word conqueror, you're likely to be wealthy. Born approximately 1028, William the Conqueror was the first Norman king of England. At its peak, he was projected to have a fortune of over $230 billion, which is just shy of doubling. Jeff Bezos has a lot of going for him. So how was he able to accumulate so much money? For those who aren't familiar with his name, William, like many English lords in the past, made his money by robbing and swindling everyone he came across. Approximately 100,000 people perished in his conquest of England in 1066. When he became king, he made a number of decisions that altered the course of events in England. Because he was not fluent in English, he abolished slavery and forced everyone in England to speak Franglish. One of the most powerful landowners in English history, he erected more than 500 castles in England and Wales during his prosperous reign. When he died in 1087, his garments and valuables were instantly removed from his body by Lucas, leaving him bare. Number 9. Osman Ali Khan, $236 billion. A new addition to our roster of billionaires. In 1937, Osman Ali Khan was featured on the cover of Time magazine as the richest person on the planet. The last monarch of Hyderabad's princely state was in India. His wealth was well known. So what was his net worth? According to the Guinness Book of World Records, he was worth $750 billion. However, most modern experts place his net worth around $236 billion. On this one, I'll have to rely on the advice of the specialists. He had a life unlike any of us could have ever imagined, however. He always had the Jakob diamond, the world's 5th largest polished diamond. He could put it on a ring or a necklace or a glass box, as one might expect. Despite this, Osman Ali Khan kept the diamond in his office as a paperweight. There were many other jewels that belonged to him, and they were passed down from king to ruler in the family. A Satlada necklace with 465 pearls was among the 173 jewels in his collection that contained 2,000 carats of emerald and hundreds of pearls. $2 billion is the approximate value of all the diamonds together. Only a small portion of Osman's enormous fortune. Yet despite having 50 Rolls Royces and 300 attendants, he didn't always act like a man of means. He was well known for wearing the same hat for the most of his life, eating off a tin dish, and begging his guests to share a smoke with him. During his reign, he was even reported to have knit himself a pair of socks. With his efforts, he brought electricity-powered planes and trains to the area. Additionally, he was well known for his charitable contributions to Indian educational and religious institutions. Number 8. Nikolay Romanov, $300 billion. The Romanovs, Russia's most famous wealthy family, have been around for a long time. To their dismay, their affluence was one of the factors contributing to their indiscriminate slaughter. The estimated wealth of Russia's last Tsar, Nikolay Romanov, was put at $300 billion. Historians aren't the only ones who think he was a weak and poor leader. And they weren't the only ones. Nikolay was even credited with saying, "I am not prepared to be a Tsar. I never wanted to be one. I know nothing of the business of ruling." Despite of his lack of ability and unwillingness to rule, He clearly relished the wealth he amassed during his time in power. He earned a salary of 200,000 rubles a year, plus an additional 20,000 rubles to spend on clothing and other odd stuff. Instead of staying within his 20,000 ruble budget, he routinely went over it, sometimes by as much as 150. As a point of comparison, manufacturing employees made 500 rubles a year, while high-ranking generals made 5,000 rubles. The amount of money he had to spend was 40 times greater than the average worker's annual wage. In other words, what precisely did he do with all that cash? Basically, everything he desired. At least 20,000 rubles was spent each month on custom-made clothing and military uniforms for him. His wife, on the other hand, was known to spend up to $40,000 on jewels on similar shopping sprees. There are also the activities that Nikolay paid for. His crowning was the most lavish in Russian history. It took 24 tons of silver and gold flatware and a choir of 1,200 singers to bring the silver and gold to the ceremony. He was a big fan of throwing parties for both himself and his country. His 300,000th anniversary celebration included pardoning all civil debt and making nearly 1.5 million gold, silver, and bronze medals in honor of the occasion to remember it. In addition, he created postal stamps, handkerchiefs, and mugs in large quantities. In other words, he gave everyone incredibly expensive goodie packages to take home with them. Excessive eating and costly travel were two of his other well-known quirks. With a staff of 55, his kitchen served 3 tiers of meals. Breakfast, a 5-course lunch, and a 4-course dinner were all included in the most basic package. Even leftovers from the fancy food were presented as delicacies at smaller restaurants. Hunting expeditions comprised the majority of his travels. This was made possible in part by the presence of 50 crew members, among them painters who painted scenes from the hunt. Hunting costs were equal to the annual pay of 100 school teachers. Number 7. Andrew Carnegie, $309 billion. When you think of affluent American families, you probably think of the Carnegies. Andrew Carnegie was a steel tycoon who rose from changing thread spools in a mill to a fortune of $309 billion. He began his career as a telegraph messenger, and his success, hard work, and attention to detail led him to become the superintendent of the Western Division of the Pennsylvania Railroad. By the time he was 24 years old, his superiors had taught him about business and influenced his investment decisions, which led him to invest a significant amount of money in the railroad industry. Left the railroad industry just as it began to flourish after the Civil War, and went on to establish other ironworks enterprises, including Keystone Bridge Works and Union Iron Works. In addition, he founded Carnegie Steel, which he sold to J.P. Morgan for a staggering $13 billion. His huge and well-known riches was utilized in a pretty contemporary manner. The subject of his book, The Gospel of Wealth, is a social duty of the wealthy. He also lived by his most famous saying, "The man who dies rich dies shamed." He donated the equivalent of $4.8 billion to charity, and following his death, he handed away the majority of his wealth. He left a tiny portion of his riches to his family, as well as substantial amounts to his housekeeper, nurse, principal staff, and butler. Number 6. Jakob Fugger, $400 billion. Jakob the Wealthy was a nickname given to Jakob Fugger. They made a fortune selling textiles with Italy, and Jakob was born into it. Jakob began mining for silver, quicksilver, copper, and cinnabar as soon as he was old enough to do so. As an investor, he had a natural ability to diversify his portfolio, and it worked out well for him. Toward the end, he was lending out money to the Vatican. Several Vatican buildings, including the Sistine Chapel, were built using funds from his estate. During Italy's Golden Age, he was known to indulge in a few frivolous purchases here and there. Many of the things he referred to were construction, art, or luxury attire. This was a win-win situation for him and his wife. He once bought his wife a jewelry set of 40,000 guilders. His own 4-story house was a modern Renaissance structure at the time. Every room has a fireplace and a water feature. Also, he was a generous soul. FUGGER, which he founded, was the world's first low-income housing initiative. While occupants originally had to pray 3 times each day for the FUGGER family's well-being, the property currently houses 52 families in need and only charges them an annual rent of 1 guilder, or roughly 88 cents. There's no information on whether or not the family still needs to be prayed for. Number 5. John D. Rockefeller, $400 billion. Jeff could be the wealthiest person in the United States right now, but he still has a long way to go to catch John D. Rockefeller, the wealthiest American of all time. That name should ring a bell with you. The oil tycoon's fortune was estimated to be worth over $400 billion. In 1870, he formed the Standard Oil Company, which quickly became extremely valuable. Standard Oil Company had a monopoly on 90% of the oil in the United States at one point. His personal fortune grew to the point where it accounted for 2% of the national economy. With all of his wealth, Rockefeller was able to live a lavish lifestyle. He owned properties all around the country, including the Kaikut, which has 40 home rooms with views of the New York City. The Kaikut Mansion, which took 6 years to create and contained collections of Chinese pottery and 20th century art, was only the beginning. The house was built on the Pocantico Estate, which was later named after it. The estate was 3,500 acres in size, with 75 houses, 70 roads, and 9 complete reverse golf courses, as well as outdoor swimming pools, tennis courts, a full-sized bowling alley, billiard halls, and its own farm and gardens. Rockefeller wasn't popular with the general people, but as he got older, he really upped his philanthropy game. He gave 10% of his money to charity every year. Number 4. AKBAR, $500 billion. During the 15th century, AKBAR I possessed a large empire and a fortune believed to be approximately $500 billion US. He may have been worth considerably more, according to some estimations. Genghis Khan's direct ancestor, he was destined to rule and conquer. It wasn't long before his size tripled in the span of his reign, as he worked tirelessly to acquire as much land as possible. His empire, known as the Mughal Empire, spanned from the northern of India all the way to Afghanistan at the end of his reign. Of all of his accomplishments, he was best recognized for promoting religious tolerance, something that had never been done before. Even though he was a Muslim, most of his closest advisors and municipal officials are Hindus. With his help, the 2 major religions were brought together, and people were given the option to pick whatever path they wanted to follow. Aside from assisting to translate Hindu literature, he was also known to get involved in Hindu festivals and festivities. It is unknown how much money he possessed, but it is known that he had a large amount of it. For a long time, his empire held a quarter of the world's GDP. Elegant cravings, miniature paintings, and a collection of exceptionally rare furnishings were claimed to adorn his palace. Number 3. Augustus Caesar. Despite the fact that Julius Caesar was more well-known, it was his son, Augustus Caesar, who inherited the family fortune. He is the only confirmed trillionaire in history to have a net worth equal to or more than the Roman Empire's 30% share of global GDP at the time of his fortune. Most experts estimate that his net worth was anywhere between $4.3 and $4.5 trillion. In addition to his own efforts, he received a large portion of his money through his emperorship. Nobody knows exactly how much money he inherited from Julius Caesar. Upon his death, Julius is said to have left each Roman citizen 300 sesterces. At the time, 300 sesterces was equivalent to 4 months' salary. So it didn't even make a dent in his financial situation. It wasn't just Julius, though, who provided financial support to Augustus. Several well-to-do families made bequests to the emperor in the hopes of ensuring the political safety of their own future generations. The Roman Empire had more than doubled in size during his 40-year reign as a wealthy tyrant. There were established police and fire departments, a courier system, and highways that brought the city into the 21st century. Augustus lived at a palace that is now known as the House of Augustus during the course of his lifetime. There were entire rooms in Augustus's home devoted to art and weaponry. Every floor was supposed to be covered in mosaics, and every wall was supposed to be covered with frescoes. After his death, he was quoted saying, "I found Rome made of clay, and I'll leave it marble to you." Indeed, under his leadership, the empire enjoyed peace and prosperity for more than 2 centuries. Number 2. SHEZONG of Song. The second highest earner in our list also happens to be the most enigmatic. For more than a century, Emperor SHEZONG of Song ruled China. Fortunately for him, this occurred during a period of great prosperity and affluence in China. Farmers' rights were awarded because they were the best bronzeware manufacturers in the world. As a result of a dramatic increase in rice output, the country became a commercial superpower. Gunpowder, printing, and magnetic compasses were all developed at this time, as were other technologies. Paper money was invented during the Song dynasty, as well as the world's first navy. They were able to keep their products safe because of the navy's protection of their trade routes. SHEZONG was able to manage 30% of the world's GDP thanks to his innovation and a highly organized economy. Incomparable wealth has been ascribed to his persona. A large part of his financial success may be traced back to a system of increased tax collecting he instituted that was more advanced than European governments by hundreds of years. Experts estimate it to be in the trillions of euros. SHEZONG, despite his wealth, was famed for his generosity. A pioneer of today's welfare state, he is considered a predecessor of modern welfare policy. The unemployed, the homeless, and the peasants all benefited from his initiatives. Number 1. MANSA MUSA, the world's richest man ever according to a recent estimate. If you've never heard of him, you'll never forget him after this. It is impossible to comprehend how much money MANSA MUSA possessed because he was able to ride throughout Africa on the back of zebras, carrying thousands of pounds of gold, and it was just a drop in the bucket to him. When his predecessor went missing while seeking to reach the southernmost point of the Atlantic Ocean in the early 1300s, he was named Emperor of the Mali Empire. Europe was in dire straits during the reign of MANSA MUSA. All of Europe's kingdoms were brought to their knees by the Great Famine, civil conflict, and a little thing called Black Death. But Mali was doing fantastic. When it came to producing gold and salt, it was the world's most important source. The first few years of MANSA MUSA's reign saw the conquest of 24 cities and the surrounding areas. Yet, even in his own, Egypt, and the Middle East, nothing was known about him. However, when MANSA MUSA converted to Islam and began his pilgrimage to Mecca, everything changed. If you have that much money, you don't really need to rough it on a pilgrimage. His journey to Mecca spanned 4,000 kilometers, and he wasn't the only one on the trip. As many as 10,000 warriors, slaves, and heralds were on board. Persian silk was worn by all, and they all had gold staff. The camels and animals were laden with gold weights, totaling hundreds of pounds. At least 80 camels weighing between 50 and 300 pounds each were on the scene. Everyone could see him as he traveled across Africa. When he heard he was nearing Cairo, El Nasir the Sultan ordered him to visit his palace, where he lavished him with gifts of riches. MANSA MUSA initially objected, but eventually relented to El Nasir's insistence that he accompany him. The tension rose when MANSA MUSA refused to kiss the feet of El Nasir, as it was customary at the period. El Nasir offered him a place to stay for the night once he finally agreed to the deal. Whenever he chuckled, the streets of Cairo were paved with gold, and its residents were luxuriating in their good fortune as a result of his time in the city. But sadly, dispersing the wealth became problematic. It would take 12 years for the cities of Cairo, Medina, and Mecca to regain their financial footing after his donations devalued metal. On his long journey to Mecca, it is reported that he funded the construction of a mosque every day. While in Mecca, he dedicated himself to his faith for 4 days and learned a great deal about it. Returning home, he set about constructing palaces, mosques, and educational institutions. A major university and center of learning was established throughout his realm by Sankor Madrasa. There were more than 1 million manuscripts on display at the university. Sadly, the Empire of Mali began to crumble not long after Mansa Musa's death in 1199. The country's ability to trade began to decline as a result of a continual civil war. As early as the 1600s, European cities began encroaching on Mali in order to take advantage of its natural resources. That's all for this video. What are your thoughts about the world's 10 wealthiest people? Join the conversation in the comment section below. Please click the like and subscribe button if you enjoy this video. We'll see you in the next video.